Inflation is one of the most powerful forces in the global economy. It's silent, it's constant, and deeply connected to everything we do. It decides how governments borrow, how businesses grow, how people spend, and even how countries rise or fall. Economically, inflation isn't just about prices. It's about movement. It's about how money circulates through production, trade, and investment. At its core, inflation is a signal. It tells us how healthy or unbalanced an economy is. Economists define it as the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises over time. But beneath that definition lies something deeper. How much trust people have in the system itself, because every economy is built on confidence. When people believe prices will stay predictable, they spend, invest, and plan. When they lose that confidence, they pull back, and everything slows down. Inflation shows up whether money is being managed wisely or if it's slipping out of control. Inflation doesn't just change prices, it changes behavior. Consumers spend faster, businesses hoard materials, investors shift capital, and governments tighten policy. So inflation isn't just numbers, it's about maintaining balance. Balance between prices, wages, and productivity. Interest rates are the steering wheel of inflation management. When central banks raise interest rates, borrowing becomes more expensive, and that slows down consumer spending, businesses' investment, and economic growth. On the other hand, when they lower rates, money becomes cheaper, and this results in more borrowing, more spending, more movement. But there's always a lag, a time delay between raising rates and seeing results. Economies are like ships, you don't turn them instantly, and that's why central banks often get criticized. People expect immediate results, but monetary policy takes months to show. Economically, inflation is a balancing act. Too little spending and growth dies. Too much spending and inflation rises. This is why economists call inflation the pulse of an economy. It's how fast or slow money moves through the system. If we look at global trade, currency and inflation doesn't stop at borders. In today's interconnected world, economies are linked through trade, currency and capital flows. Economically, countries that produce what they consume are more resilient. Those countries that depend on imports are more exposed. Inflation reminds us that independence is an economic advantage. But as always, there are winners and losers in inflationary economies. Because inflation doesn't affect everyone equally. In every economy, there are winners and losers. The winners are the borrowers because they repay debts with money that's worth less. Governments, they win because tax revenue rises and debt shrinks in real value. Owners of real estates, property, gold, commodities, because tangible assets often rise with inflation. But there are also losers. Savers, because their money loses purchasing power. Fixed income workers, whose wages don't adjust quickly enough. Import-heavy businesses, which face higher costs. And that's why inflation periods create inequality, if not managed carefully. Economically, inflation reveals the structure of a country. How much of its wealth sits in production versus speculation, in savings versus investments. Over time, inflation reshapes economies. It changes investment patterns, pushing people towards assets like real estate or equities. In a strange way, inflation can be productive. It acts like economic pressure that forces systems to evolve. But when inflation becomes chronic, it kills long-term planning. Businesses stop investing, consumers lose confidence, and the economy becomes defensive instead of creative. And that's why the best performing economies aren't those with no inflation, but those with predictable inflation. So, what can we take from all this? Inflation from an economic perspective is both a symptom and a signal. It tells us when money is moving too fast, when production can't keep up, or when policy has lost alignment with reality. Economically, the goal isn't to eliminate inflation, it's to understand it. Because inflation managed properly is a sign of life. It means the economy is growing, moving, evolving. The danger isn't inflation itself, it's when we stop trusting the system that manages it. Thank you for joining me this month through this 4-part series on inflation, where we explored it from the personal, business, political and economic perspectives. Because the more you understand how the system works, the less it controls you. Thank you for watching. My name is Remco Coerman and this is the Coerman Class, Finance and Business School, sponsored by Epic Edges.